Hello everybody, how goes it? Rabbitsmore here, and today I'm doing something a little different for my channel. I'm going to be doing a guide for Minecraft PvP. And as far as PvP goes, or Minecraft PvP goes, I've had a lot of success with it in the past and I really enjoy it. And I've won a ton of fights and looted a ton of bases, and I figured that it would be pretty fun to do a series of guides for it to try to help other people out. Because as far as my experience goes on servers, there's not a lot of people who are really too great at it. They seem to just want to go in and just expect to be able to get kills and be able to find bases and stuff, and then they end up leaving. So I figured I would try to share some knowledge from what I've done and from my experiences. So if this gets pretty good responses, I'll try to turn this into a series and do multiple videos. So you can expect those on this in my channel. And as far as this video goes, it's going to be focusing on finding players and their bases, which is probably one of the most important parts of Minecraft PvP, if not the most important part. So I'm going to be going over the basics and the intermediates and the advanced ways of finding players and bases here, to cover all the bases here, just in case you have little to no experience or you have a little bit already. I'm going to be going over each of those things individually so that we can know all of the different ways of finding a base or a player. So I'll be going through those in each little segments here. Alright, so we're in a new fresh spawn world here. I'm not in a server because finding a base doesn't really require us to be on a server to find people, and I don't want to worry about people cursing or being really rude in chat or anything for now, or having weird names. So I'm just going to be doing this in survival for now, or a single player world, which is plenty good for all the examples I'm going to be giving. And I'm going to start with the basics for now in our fresh spawn world here. Obviously I'm in creative, but I'll be doing everything from perspective of survival. And I want to start first by going over rule 1 of PvP. Before I even start about finding bases, I need to start with rule 1 because I feel like it's really important. It's a rule that I come up with for myself, and I think everyone should follow it in PvP, and that is you need to be willing to lose everything. What I mean by that is, if you have a stack of diamonds on you in a PvP server and you lose it, or a player kills you, or you lose it in lava, you need to not even care about that. Just respawn, go get some more gear, and go back out. Because that's the entire point of a PvP server, is that you're supposed to have fun. You're supposed to just go out, fight people, see who wins, try your skills, and see who's better. So you shouldn't really be just trying to get loot and throwing it in a chest somewhere and hiding in your base. So you need to be willing to lose everything. So always keep that in mind in PvP. Never be upset about your losses, and try to learn from them, and you'll be a much better player in the end. So we're going to start with the basics of what I would consider the basics of finding a player's base. And we're starting in a fresh spawn here. I actually spawned right here in this world. And one of the first things that I would say, as far as if you're trying to find other players or their bases, is try to think like the enemy. And what I mean by that is we need to think where other players would go if we were in their shoes in any situation. So, for example, if I spawned here, I would take a look around this area here, and I would think, at least as far as my experience goes, most players try to avoid any area that would have a lot of water, so something like a swamp or an ocean. They typically avoid those. And I would say that most players, from my experience also, like to go towards hills. So this is a pretty good area that I would start heading towards. And also noticing this dark forest over here, or the roofed forest, whatever these are called with the darker trees, that's also something that would catch my eye in the beginning. But as far as both of those go, those would be some of the beginning things. So try to think of what your opponent would be doing or where they would be heading to set up a base somewhere. And I would say generally, at least in this situation, I would head towards this hill here, because that's where I would think most players would go to. And then as you're going, keep thinking the same thing. Where would someone else go if they were here? So maybe if I was here, I would take a look around, check what kind of resources are out here, notice that there's a hill and not many places to go, and I would expect most people to go out towards this area here where there's plenty of trees and open area over here. Maybe some people would go this way, but obviously there's not a good way to go onto this hill and things like that. But you can see where I'm going with this. You need to be thinking not where you want to be going, but where your enemy would be going if you were them, and where they would be going to set up a base. That's one of the beginning things, or one of the most basic things. Let me go ahead and set the time here so we have some daylight. And one of the next few things, as far as the basics of finding someone, is look for things that are out of place in the world. So things like this. People are going to come by and grab trees for wood, for crafting benches and things, and they're probably not going to chop down the full tree. Or, sometimes they will if they're pretty good at it, and if you're doing it, you need to make sure to get rid of the full tree so that it doesn't leave behind anything that's going to show where you've been. But a lot of times people will come by, grab just enough for a crafting bench and leave, and you'll kind of find trails of that. So if you find something like that, again, think of where they would go and head that direction. And chances are you'll find another thing along the way. Again, it could be something like a tree like this, where someone chopped down pieces and left it there. That's a good place to start for looking for their base. Other things would be that as you're running along, you'll probably find things like crafting benches. Again, people will kind of place these, do quick crafting, and leave without thinking that they're leaving behind a trail of where they're headed to their base. So again, these are really basic things for if you've never really played Minecraft PvP on a server, just the kinds of things that you're going to be looking for to find a base. So again, you'll probably see things like this out here, and depending from where you came from or where your spawn is, it's generally good as you see things like this to then just continue in that direction from the spawn, because that's probably where that player is going. Alright, so now we're going to go into more intermediate ways to find bases, or things that are just not as obvious that you might not think of when you're playing, or are ways that maybe most people might not notice are ways to find players' bases. So a couple of these things that at least I use or know of are, let me see if I can find anything around here. Nothing too crazy. Although, again, another thing to keep note of as far as the basics go, it's kind of more intermediate, are trails that players leave behind that is probably where they've been walking or heading towards an area towards their base. Like, say there's a hill area or an area like this. You might find things like this, or maybe a couple leaves taken out here. They're not as obvious to the eye, but there's things that you need to keep an eye out for if players needed to break a leaf to jump up a hill or something like that as you're walking along. Those are kinds of things you can look for. But as far as the other more intermediate things go, there's not many great examples in this world right now from at least what I'm looking for. But the things that we want to look for are sugarcane and any area that would have cactus, so a desert area would be good as well. Although there don't seem to be many in this world for here. But I'll go over real quickly what I mean by both of those things. I'll just plant some here. So let me grab some sugarcane and some cactus. Alright. And I'm just going to go ahead and plant these over here. But as far as a normal Minecraft world goes, typically when a world generates and it has sugarcane in it, there's going to be a good chance that not all of it is grown to full height. And full height is going to be 3 tall. So as the world generates, it's going to probably be 1 tall. And things like cactus are also going to be 1 or 2 tall, and they can grow to a maximum of 3. And when you're searching around an area to find players, if you notice an area that has a lot of sugarcane that's 3 tall, so max height, or a lot of cactus that's also 3 tall, what that means is that a player was there long enough for those things to grow to 3 tall. So that means that there's either a base nearby and a loaded chunk from this area, or that a player was here for a very long time and they're headed to a base elsewhere. But generally, when I find an area like a desert that has a ton of fully grown cactus, I expect there to be a base probably within the loaded chunks of that area, so that's a great place to start searching for a base. And those are 2 things that I don't think a lot of players know about, but are great ways to track down players. And another thing to avoid if you're going to be setting up a base somewhere is avoid an area that has either of those things nearby, because it will be easy to tell. Another thing is animals, things like sheep. You'll probably find sheep that are sheared somewhere if maybe someone was making a bed or something. And that generally doesn't happen too often since they eat the grass and they grow their wool back pretty quickly. But that is something else to keep an eye out for. And another thing is hostile mobs. For instance, if you're in a fully lit area as you're running, or say I was running this direction and it's been daytime for a long time, let me go ahead and get some more sunlight. But say it's been daylight for a long time and I'm just running along the daylight, and then I see on this hill right here a zombie that's on fire because he's in the sunlight. And you have to think, what is the only reason that that zombie is even here? Because it's not nighttime and it hasn't been nighttime for a while, right? The reason that you would find something like that is because another player was there during the nighttime and then either logged off or left the area while that zombie was there. And it unloaded the chunk, it unloaded the zombie, and then the zombie came back into the chunk when you came there. So that's a great way, another way to see where someone has been or probably has a base set up, is if there are mobs out of place, like zombies in the daylight, that don't make sense. It's another great way to find bases. And another thing that I would say for intermediates is a lot of people think, or a lot of players like to think that they have hidden base entrances. And what I mean by hidden is they use things that they think are secretive but are really just obvious. So things like bases that are underwater and bases behind things like waterfalls, although I don't really have an example of a waterfall, but I do have the water. If you see bodies of water in your server, typically what people like to do, since it's kind of harder to see, is they'll go pretty far out into the center of a larger body of water, like say this one here. And then what they'll do is find an area that's a little further away from the land here, and they'll build a base down here, straight into the bottom. And sometimes they'll cover it up, but a lot of the time they won't because they figure that it's pretty hidden from view and no one's going to be looking at it. Like if you just walked by here, you wouldn't really notice that there was an entrance in the water, especially if they had it down there. So that's another thing to keep an eye out for. If you pass by bodies of water, it's a good idea to check towards the centers of them for anywhere that might have an entrance. If you notice any weird holes in the top there, you'll probably see a ladder or something blocking the hole off, if they don't cover it up. But that is another one of the intermediate ones. And like I said, with the waterfalls, if you notice any naturally generated waterfalls in a world, like, let me grab a bucket of water real quick here, we'll just make one, just for an example here. But say this was a naturally generated waterfall in the world. A good place to check again for people's bases, because they think it's hidden and easy to find, but you know that it's pretty obvious, so if you pass by something like this, I would always check behind it, just to make sure, and I would dig out a huge area behind it as well, just to make sure there's no base behind that, because that's typically where people will set up their bases because they think it's hidden, and it's easy for them to spot from a long distance away, so they know where their base is. It's another great thing to remember for an intermediate way to find a base. Alright, so now we're going to go into the more advanced ways to find bases, and I'm here back in our spawn area again for our examples. And I'm trying to keep this a little shorter per each one. I'm not giving every possible one, but I'm giving all of the most important tips that I can think of off the top of my head and all the things that I've experienced playing multiplayer, PvP, and so I'm trying to keep this a pretty good length while giving all the best tips here. So, as far as our advanced tips go, they're going to be kind of the more grindy approaches to finding bases. If you're kind of just really wanting to find bases specifically and you're kind of like a headhunter type of player, these will be more of the type for you. And for the more advanced players who know exactly what they're doing and exactly what they want to do. So I'm going to start this by doing one of the most important ones, and that is knowing the location of players' bases based on the actual coordinates, like our XYZ there on the left side of the screen. From my experience, most players generally will start in spawn, pick a direction, generally a polar direction like straight east or straight north or straight west, or maybe northwest, like this here, they'll pick an exact diagonal. They'll generally pick an exact direction and just start going in that direction for a long time. So those are great ways to find bases or players, is to start at your spawn area, pick a single direction and just go that direction, and then use the basic and intermediate ways to find bases from there to actually find the bases. So maybe I would go like 2,000 blocks in this direction as I'm searching the entire time for any sort of signs for a base. Then I would come back to spawn, pick another direction, do the same thing, and rinse and repeat. Like I said, it's really grindy, but it's specifically if you're headhunting or if you're on a server full of people who are just hiding underground. It's kind of your only way to find their bases. And another thing is that players like to have their bases at very specific coordinates, or at least the lesser experienced players, I should say. So those are the ones that you're kind of going to be searching for anyways. And the bases will probably be at coordinates that are easy to remember. And what I mean by that is their bases will probably be at places like x500, z500, or x500, z negative 500. Very easy to remember coordinates like that. Or maybe 100, 100, 1000, 1000, etc. Those will be all the best places to check. So if you're, again, very specifically looking for bases, you might want to head out to 500, 500. And even if you don't see anything obvious, just dig down to diamond level and look around that area for maybe either a base or a strip mine, and then go back up and then go check the next obvious coordinate like 500, 1000 or something like that. Those are the more advanced steps, and some of the other things that you would want to do is the same thing in the Nether. A lot of people will leave behind Nether portals in the Nether, which is a really easy way to find bases, and a pretty big rookie mistake if you're on a server. Make sure you never leave a portal behind in the Nether. Because we can move 8 blocks in the Nether to every one, or 8 blocks in the overworld to every 1 block in the Nether, it makes it really easy to find faraway bases without having to go very far if you're in the Nether and you run upon someone's Nether portal. So definitely use the Nether, look around for portals, and again use the same thing in the Nether. You're going to go to easy to remember coordinates like 100, 100, 200, 200, 500, 500, and etc. As much as you actually want to check out, obviously it's a lot of work, but it's a great way to find bases if you're specifically looking for them. Alright guys, so that's about it for this video. I don't want to make it too super long because then no one would watch it, since I don't want it to be like reading a book or anything like that, but I wanted to give away most of the basic tips that I knew and on one of the most important topics of Minecraft PvP, finding bases. So I hope that this helps you guys out. Again, I'll probably make this into a series depending on the responses, so I'll do other things like combat in PvP or where to set your base in PvP and all of those kinds of things. So hope this helps you guys out. If it did, leave a like or subscribe. Any of those things are great and I appreciate them. So as always guys, thanks for watching, have an excellent day, and see you later.